So good morning. So this is going to be Troubleshooting Multicast, the usual suspects. We have 45 minutes. So I will be also referring to the 2-hour session that is on Cisco Live for video on demand for those of you who are really newer to multicast. Because if you don't know certain terms, you're not going to be able to. It would be like telling you, like, if you didn't know troubleshooting routing, but you didn't know like EIGRP neighbors or next hop or things like that. Ceph, whatever. So my name is Fish, and Denise Fishburne. I've been with Cisco since 1996. This part I just like to say fast. I've been with Cisco since 1996. Was in TAG, Advanced Services, CPOC, yada yada yada. I'm a dual CCIE and CCDE. There we go. And if you actually take the CCIE Enterprise and Infrastructure exam in the past, since it became that, if you don't like the multicast questions on there, or tough. No, I'm kidding. No, I don't think they're that hard. So we're going to cover the usual suspects. Now, what we are going to do is, I had the slides for the usual suspects, but then I did think to myself, a number of you probably don't really have the terms in your mind. So we're going to do a super fast review, and it's going to have to be super fast so that I can get into the troubleshooting. Y'all ready for the super fast review? And I made it super fast. So here we go. Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, join the discussion. No one's there to monitor right now, so go ahead and join the WebEx. I'll be there looking at it later. So we're going to do a super fast review. So lock in, because I just couldn't not do this. I think we're going through 10 slides in like 2 minutes. Any source multicast, any source at all. I don't care what the source IP address is. Any source multicast has a rendezvous point. At the end, if you don't know what a rendezvous point is, think of it as a dating system. I have some references for you at the end for my own webpage, and for rendezvous point as a dating service and things like that. Any source multicast, I don't care who it is, just let me get to this multicast group, 239-1111. Source specific multicast, I know the source IP address and the multicast address that I want to join. MDT, multicast distribution tree. Multicast builds trees. We'll get into this, obviously. Multicast builds trees, and then the multicast traffic goes down those trees, which means the usual suspect would be tree ain't built right. Okay, rendezvous point. Think of this as the dating system. Easiest analogy is the boys are the transmitters, the girls are the receivers, and then the girls say, I want to go ahead and go out with somebody who bikes. And so let's say you bike, so any source, because I don't care, as long as you bike, okay? So you register with the rendezvous point, and then you all meet. So first hop router, rocket science. This is the first router that sees the multicast. Okay, so the first router that sees the multicast is connected to, obviously, the source. First hop router. Last hop router. It's the last router to see the multicast. It is connected to the receiver. IR is really a term I use. Some people use this term as an intermediate router. So if we're going to talk about what the usual suspects are at the first hop router, the last hop router, then I am going to use the term IR. You won't see that many people use that term. Just a few of us do. DR, the designated router. So if I am actually on a LAN segment, and a source comes, only one router will actually send the registered join to the rendezvous point. If I'm on a segment with 2 routers and there's a receiver, only one will join the multicast group. That's the DR. IGMP, Internet Group Multi-Protocol, that is actually going to be the receiver saying, hey, I want to meet someone who rides bicycles. Okay, so IGMP would be IPv4 saying, I want to join, hook me up with someone who rides bicycles. PIM, Protocol Independent Multicast. When you hear PIM, I want you to kind of sort of think EIGRP neighbor, okay? Because it's a PIM neighbor. It is Protocol Independent Multicast. The PIM is what sets up your multicast distribution tree. Any source multicast, like I said, this is the, so This is with a rendezvous point, source-specific multicast, only supports source trees because I have no rendezvous point. When you troubleshoot any source multicast, so here is, pun intended, but in multicast, the root of most of your problems is not knowing who the root is, where the root is, or what is the PIM RPF neighbor for the root. By the end of this, if you feel like joining in on those three things, feel free. Because 90% of the time, the question you're gonna ask is, who's the root? Where's the root? What's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? That's 90% of your multicast troubleshooting right there. The root is typically the root of all your problems, whether it be the IP address of the rendezvous point or the IP address of the source, and not having a PIM neighbor to send a PIM join to build the multicast distribution tree. Troubleshooting ASM plumbing, the multicast distribution trees are built backwards from the root. This is not dense mode. This is not I send multicast and it just goes out. This is sparse mode, whether you're source specific or any source multicast. A receiver multicast will not go down this way. So if I'm the source and the rendezvous point is right here, sure, multicast will go between me and the rendezvous point, but it's not gonna go anywhere down there. It's kind of like if you hooked up to the dating service and said, I want a bicycle, and no one wanted to go out with anyone with a bicycle, okay? So the traffic will get here, you will register the I'm so sorry, I didn't plan on this. You'll register, most people will tell you I never really know what I'm gonna say. You'll register with the rendezvous point with the dating service, but then, yeah, I know, story of your life, right? I'm so sorry. So the traffic actually won't go down there. So multicast distribution trees get built backwards from the root. So if somebody out there, no gender, no, never mind. And so the traffic will actually come up here and then someone over there, I'm gonna make it the lovely lady in the back, okay? We'll go with the 90% rule. So the lovely lady in the back goes ahead and she says, I want to talk to someone who wants to go bicycling. Then she says that to her router there. The router there is the last hop router. Hop by hop by hop by hop. Not that dissimilar from EIGRP routing. But we'll talk about that. It will then get to you. Yes, sir.
So is it like the source builds the root builds the trunk, and then the subscribers will build branches back to the trunk?
I like that. That's a nice idea. Yeah, I like that. In any source multicast, yes. So in any source multicast, you have two roots. You have the root of the shared tree, which is the star comma G, which is the rendezvous point. So you need to know who the rendezvous point is. What is the IP address? You need to know where the rendezvous point is in your rib. You need to have a PIM RPF neighbor for that rendezvous point, because when I send a PIM star comma G join to you, I send it to my PIM neighbor. It is a PIM joining, and that's how you build the multicast distribution trees, by joining it, by making branches on the way to the root. Then we have the first top router, we're gonna get to there also. So you build the multicast distribution trees backwards towards the root. The traffic flows over the tree, and I tend to troubleshoot backwards. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, well, multicast is backwards thinking. Just hold that thought for a second. Source-specific multicast. Anyone do source-specific multicast? Okay, cool. Source-specific multicast, you build the root all the way back to the source. So everyone on the way, while the traffic goes in this direction, from source 10.1.1.1, people don't think about this very much. While the multicast traffic goes in this direction, I actually have to build the tree all the way back, which means I need to know who the source is. I need to know where it is. That's weird to people because the multicast traffic is going in this direction. Why should I ever advertise my multicast subnet, my transmitter subnet, so we can build something back towards it? Okay? So you troubleshoot backwards. Star comma G. So if I say star comma G, I mean the star comma G, the I don't care who, as long as they bicycle. That is also known as the shared tree. It's also known as the RP tree. S, G. That means that you know who the source is, 10.1.1.1, comma, G, 239.1.1.1. I might also call it the shortest path tree, and I might also call it the source tree. So the star, comma, G. Who is the root of the star, comma, G? RP, very good. So it's the RP. Who is the root of the S, comma, G? The source. Okay? Knowledge of the root is critical. 90% of the time, who's the root, where's the root, what's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? Even when I'm doing like MVPN multicast. Incoming interface. It's the interface that has the traffic coming in. Okay? I know, it's a shock. So the incoming interface is towards your root because the traffic is coming down there, whether it's the shared tree or the source tree. Your outcoming interface is where somebody has done a join. So the incoming interface of the star, comma, G points towards the traffic is coming in, so points toward the rendezvous point. So the incoming interface for the shared tree, because the incoming interface always has the traffic coming in, and the nutrients in the tree come from the root. The multicast traffic comes from the root. The incoming interface of the source, comma, G tree points towards the source. I'm just going to show you this real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and do some more stuff, just because of the fact that I've been saying star, comma, G and S, comma, G. And again, this is a very tight session, so it's just really covering the usual suspects and not how to troubleshoot. For that, you'll want to watch the 2-hour session that I have up on Cisco Live Video on Demand. So this is a star, comma, G, does I don't care who, 239111. You're going to have the rendezvous point in there. If that's 0, that might be a problem. Your incoming interface should be the incoming interface towards your root. This is really important. So the two things here that are really, well, a couple things here. One, you want to have a star, comma, G. If there's no star, comma, G, then no one's trying to join. I'm so sorry. So if there's no star, comma, G, then no one's trying to join, okay? So if there's no rendezvous point, that's a problem. Who's the RP? Where's the RP? What's the PIM RPF neighbor for the RP? This is your RPF neighbor. So if you were to want to join and send that incoming interface, then I send the PIM star, comma, G join to my RPF neighbor. So if you don't have an RPF neighbor, so that's the third. Who's the root? Where's the root? What's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? Because again, we build the multicast distribution tree one hop at a time with PIM joins, either a PIM star, comma, G join or a PIM S, comma, G join. This is your outgoing interface. This is who wants the traffic. And these are your flags. Big S means any source multicast. Little s means source-specific multicast. Building the plumbing. It is, in solving a problem of this sort, the grand thing is to be able to reason backwards. This is very useful and very easy, but people don't practice it much. So I will tell you that a lot of people say, you know, multicast, it's backwards. Now let's forget static routes for a second. Let's look at unicast. Let's just pretend you can't have static routes. And 10.1.1.1 wants to ping 10.2.1.1. Well, in order for it to work, we have to actually advertise hop by hop by hop with a routing protocol. You have to build the plumbing. Sound familiar? Backwards from where you're trying to get to. So I actually have to advertise, and this actually starts putting the plumbing pieces together. So with unicast, once the plumbing is actually done, then I can go ahead and send the traffic over it. So what would be the usual suspects? Oh, I'm so sorry. And when I write EIGRP there, of course, what we know what I mean is that's an EIGRP neighbor. So let's look at what the usual suspects are for unicast. The usual suspects are, I'm missing a piece of the plumbing, no EIGRP neighbor. Spoiler alert, not too dissimilar from multicast. I'm missing a PIM neighbor. Subnets on the interfaces on the routers towards the 10.111 or the 10.211 are not included in the routing. Spoiler alert. Same thing with the end. If I am a router and you're the receiver, and I don't have PIM or IGMP or something enabled here, I don't listen to you sending an IGMP membership report. Okay, so people think you need PIM in the middle, which is true, but you need something on the end. The simplest thing at the end is to just do PIM sparse mode as well. Okay, because on the receiver side, you're sending actually to a specific address, not a unicast address. You're sending to a multicast address when you send the IGMP membership report. I have to be listening to that. So on the receiver side, I must have that to listen to what I'm going to refer to as the pull. Okay, you're the source. You go ahead and just send out 239.1.1.1. I'm the first hop router. Unless I have PIM or something on here to tell me to pay attention to you, you just get the hand. Then you can just send all day. So don't forget to include the endpoints where the source and the receiver are. So not too dissimilar from unicast routing. Lack of knowledge somewhere in the plumbing. Where's the subnet? Rib. What's your next hop for it? So there's a lot of similarities. And people don't think about that because you don't usually do multicast. So this is like, oh, it's so scary. But it's really just the plumbing. And of course, the general ones. So with multicast, what's going to happen is, and for this perspective, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the receivers. Why are we going to start with the receiver? Because when someone says the multicast isn't working, it's usually a receiver's not getting it. Okay? So I don't usually start at the source. I usually start at the receiver. So we're going to start the receiver here, and what we're going to see is that I actually have to do the same thing. So first and foremost, and this is the biggest difference, unicast routing, the EIGRP neighbor is missing. Multicast, the PIM neighbor is missing. Unicast routing, I didn't include the two ends. Multicast, I didn't include the receiver subnet and the source subnet in the multicast. Unicast is not in the rib, or I don't know the next hop. Who's the root? Where's the root? What's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? The biggest difference between those two from a troubleshooting perspective is for multicast, you need that pull. Remember, you need someone back there to say, I want to go bicycling. And for that to come all the way up here. So you need that pull. And so you need the pull, and then after you get the pull, so as soon as you get the pull, then the last hop router is going to go ahead and do a PIM star comma G join because you said star comma bicycling. So I'm like, okay, so your last hop router goes ahead and says star comma bicycling, star comma bicycling, star comma bicycling, star comma bicycling, star comma bicycling. Okay? So we're going to build that all the way to the rendezvous point. Now, once we actually do this, we stop because it's any source multicast. And I don't have any source sending traffic yet. Right? So it's kind of like a dating service where the women go ahead and say, I want bicycling, I want kayaking, I want a guy who doesn't live with his parents anymore, that kind of stuff. And but they just sit there until the sources register. Okay, so this is as far as you get right now. And the source, it's interesting because if we build the traffic, if we build the MDT trees backwards toward the source, I can't build it forwards. Right? That's dense mode. Dense mode is just assuming that everybody wants it. So you send me the multicast and I just start sending it at all my interfaces. That's dense mode multicast. Very few people run dense mode multicast. So for specific multicast, we have to build it backwards. So what actually happens is, according to the RFC, is the first hop router will actually put a unicast register join in the front and send it directly to the IP address of the rendezvous point. Who's the rendezvous point? Where's the rendezvous point? And ironically, it won't actually, if it has no PIM neighbors on most platforms, it won't actually even send out the join because it's smart enough to know that it's never going to come back. So it needs at least one PIM neighbor. So this is a PIM register join. And so, again, we build backwards. So now someone has registered, okay? So that was you, I'm so sorry. So registered, and then we build backwards towards the first hop router. Once we actually do this, then the multicast can go through. So from this perspective, and this is source-specific multicast. So for those of you doing source-specific multicast, there is no rendezvous point. So you need the pull, and then you need to do a PIM S comma G join, which means you need to know who. So if it's S, if it's 10.1.1.1, then everyone needs to know who's the root, 10.1.1.1, where's the root, it's got to be in the RIB, and what's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root. Again, I've seen so many people not advertise their multicast subnet because it's like, oh, it's just going that way. No, we have to build it back. Okay, so for source-specific multicast, it's the same thing, except that it's an S, G join, and there's no rendezvous point. I kiddingly would say that source-specific is more like being married. You know exactly who your source is in the group. So if we look at this and we look at who the usual suspects are for any source multicast, then it's missing a piece of the plumbing, no PIM neighbor. Missing a pull from the receiver, so no IGMP, membership report. No saying, I want anyone who bicycles. By the way, MLD is the IPv6 version of IGMP. Interfaces on the routers towards the source and the receivers are not included in the multicast. Simplest thing is I didn't put PIM on the receiver subnet. I didn't put PIM on the source subnet. Lack of knowledge of the plumbing. Who's the root? Where's the root? Where's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? And of course, the usual suspects. Now, so what happens here? What am I missing? So all of this is all done, okay? So you like kayaking, so you registered for kayaking, and then you just registered for kayaking. So if you had this environment, and that's it, and that's all the plumbing that had been done, what are we missing? We're missing the pole. Someone said pole. We're missing the receivers. Okay, so just because the traffic is running, you're missing the receivers. Remember, the rendezvous point is the dating service. It's where the sources and the receivers meet up. Because it's any source multicast, it is not marriage. So you're missing the pull from the receiver. Multicast routing must be enabled globally. Unicast routing must be enabled globally. What a shock. Okay, PIM must be enabled on the interfaces for the neighbors to form. EIGRP must be enabled on the interfaces for the neighbors to form. Multicast trees get built backwards towards the root. We just saw, actually, if you weren't using static routes, that the subnets are actually passed backwards as well. Multicast traffic in ASM and SSM are triggered by a pull. Okay, this is unique. So this is facts to remember. It's also high on the food chain. What do I mean it's high on the food chain? Who runs BGP? How about IBGP? Okay, cool. So if I'm an IBGP peer with you way over there, and we have all of this IGP in the middle, I call that high on the food chain. Okay, because our IBGP neighborship and what traffic is running between us is dependent on all of the routing underneath. So who's the RP, where is it, RIB? So multicast is high on the food chain. It's dependent on the underlying routing protocol working and the PIM working. Not too dissimilar from IBGP. I'm reliant on you all to help him and I actually have our IBGP peer. So it's high on the food chain. So troubleshoot your routing and troubleshoot your PIM. Ready? Who's the root? Where's the root? What's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? Why? Oh, and then the membership report. Knowledge of the root of the RP or the root is critical. You check routing, and make sure you have PIM neighbors. Yes, sir?
Do you normally prefer to specify the RPs or use like auto?
Oh, the question is, do I prefer to specify RPs or auto RP? I'm a control freak. And no, I want my network, I want to configure with intent. So there's your answer. So years and years and years ago when people didn't touch the routers everywhere, when it was like, oh my God, we don't want to touch the routers, auto RP was bigger there. I like static, even if I'm doing like Anycast or MSDP. I like static and I put override on because that is my intention. By the way, in some platforms, auto RP will actually override a static unless you put override at the end. So I prefer statics. I prefer statics because I prefer to know what's going on in my network. These are your typical toolbox things. Okay, ASM troubleshooting. So I'm going to give you an example. We're going to walk through the example and I'm going to tell you who the usual suspects are. I'm not expecting you to catch on with everything I'm doing right now, but these slides are also for you later. So there's going to be three things that are going to happen. I'm going to do the star, comma, G all the way from the last hop router to the rendezvous point. Okay, that's I want a bicycle, I want a bicycle, I want a bicycle, I want a bicycle. This is the first hop router registering with the rendezvous point, and then building the S, comma, G tree on the way back. Now, who thinks we stop right there typically? So a lot of people, and it's a frequently forgotten fact. So if you're in New Jersey and she's in New Jersey and the dating service is in New York, why constantly go through New York, like when you're one block away from each other? So at the end, the last hop router can cut over to the shortest path tree. So you just have to remember that also, because that means that I need knowledge down here also for the source. It's not just between the first hop router and the rendezvous point. Yes?
So the RP is really like a control traffic thing, but it's that the actual traffic itself doesn't pass through. That's kind of what I was
The question is the RP a control traffic thing, but the traffic doesn't pass through it? It depends on, the answer is it depends on how you configure the last hop router. In a lot of environments for hub and spoke, a lot of people will just do the spoke for the shared tree, because it's like, well, I only have that coming down the WAN interface, so I don't need the S, comma, G for everything, especially when we hit smaller routers. So we're going to cover this one right here. So we need the star, comma, G. So we need to go ahead, and for this to work, we need the LHR, the last hop router, to send a PIM star, comma, G join to R4, which means it's going to ask the question, who's the RP? What's the IP address? So I have to have knowledge of it. Everyone has to have knowledge of the RP. Everyone has to have it as a static or whatever. You can't just learn it from the guy who just talked to you before. So I have to do this. Okay, so I have a question. Notice it says 1B. So what has to come before 1B? So what has to come before 1A, 1B is the 1A. Don't ever forget the pull. Don't look for the star, comma, G join until the pull has happened. This is basically your checklist at every single solitary. So on the last hop router, your checklist is 4 things. Did you get an IGMP membership report? If you got a star, comma, G with an oil on it, and it's going out to the right interface, congratulations. Okay? And then every hop along the way is going to ask the same bloody questions. This is what you're going to do on the last hop router. And then when R4 gets it, guess what? So R4 is an intermediate router. Every intermediate router is just going to be, who is it, where is it, what is it? So when R5 sends me the PIM star, comma, G join, if I don't have one, I create a star, comma, G join. Actually, I create a star, comma, G join, and then I figure out who the RP is for that group, because you can have different rendezvous points for different groups, right? Straight dating service, non-straight dating service. Okay, so you might have 239/8 be this rendezvous point, and then 238, whatever, this rendezvous point. So you get it. I look at who the rendezvous point is for that group. I create a star, comma, G. I figure out what the incoming interface is. I figure out what my PIM RPF neighbor is, and I add the interface from you to the outgoing interface list. And then I send a PIM star, comma, G join to you. And that's basically what every single solitary router is doing. And then we get to the rendezvous point. Congratulations, we got to the rendezvous point. And I'm telling you, I know this sounds so simple, but I'm telling you, I had a quadruple CCIE who was in CPOC with me, and he brought me, it's like, I can't get the multicast to work. Who's the root? Where's the root? What's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? Had it done in 5 minutes. And he's like, oh, you're so smart. I'm like, do I tell him? No. So now this part is confusing, okay? I will tell you that this part, the first hop router receives the multicast traffic. So you send me multicast traffic. Biggest issue is that people forget to put PIM over here. So we're not listening to it. Okay? The first apparatus registers with the rendezvous point, and then we build it backwards. So I will tell you, this is actually what happens. If you want this explained, watch the 2-hour session. What actually happens is this specific thing. Okay, we send the unicast register join, and then we pull it, we go backwards towards the root. And yes, I know this is very confusing. So let's just go ahead and suffice it to say that what you need to know, number one here, is that R1 has PIM enabled on the interface. I'm listening to the multicast. Number two, the first operator has to have knowledge of the root. And the thing that I see the most is number three. The rendezvous point does not have the IP subnet of the multicast sources because people thought that it just goes this way. The multicast traffic just goes this way. It's not like a ping and then you're going to give me an ICMP echo reply. The multicast is only going to go this way, so I don't have to advertise it. So that's one of the most common problems with people new to multicast is they forget to advertise the subnet, and then the rendezvous point can never build the tree back to the source. So we've got that one, we've got that one. This is the frequently forgotten fact. The frequently forgotten fact is, if at your last hop router, your SPT threshold, shortest path tree threshold, is not infinity, the default is 0, so that's not infinity, okay? So if the SPT threshold is not infinity, when the multicast stream comes down, they'll cut over to the source tree. And then people ask me, well, but, okay, so the traffic comes down the shared tree, right? So it comes down the star comma G. And then I take it, and then I pass it to the receiver. How do I know who the source is? You just passed the packet. Okay, I just passed the packet. I mean, I just gave it to them. So I can see what the source is. Right? So if it's 10.1.1.1, it came down the shared tree and it hit me, and it's 10.1.1.1, comma 239.1.1.1, I can look at that. And then I will go ahead and I will, by default, typically, I will cut over to the shortest path tree. That is the default behavior. So I will then look and I will say, who's the root? 10.1.1.1. Where is it? Out which interface? My star comma G, I could be having traffic coming down here because you're the rendezvous point, right? But so that source over there went this way and then over to here. And then I joined you as a receiver. So I'm getting the multicast traffic over there, but I have a connection from you to that. So my routing table says that I have a shorter path to 10.1.1.1 this way. Okay, so I'm like, oh, thank you very kindly, I'm gonna go that way. Okay, and then you do prunes and stuff like that because it's a tree, right? So then that will try to cut over to the shortest path tree. When I say try to cut over, if it doesn't know, again, if you haven't advertised the source, so you're seeing certain trends here as to like what the problems are, right? So now the LHR asks 3 questions. Who's the root? Where's the root? What's the PIM RPF neighbor? So, but the question is, it's an S comma G now. So who's the root of the S comma G? The source. So who? 10.1.1.1. Where? Oh, it's that way. So then I have hopefully a PIM RPF neighbor to you, and I set a PIM S comma G join. And then I do that all the way up. Source-specific multicast troubleshooting is very similar to troubleshooting in S comma G. So who's doing source-specific again? So source-specific troubleshooting is extremely similar to any source multicast except without the dating service. Okay? The end device will come on with a different IGMP, so IGMP version 3. So the usual suspects with source-specific multicast are 3 of them. You're not getting a pull because IGMP version 3 is not necessarily the default to the receiver. So I need to be able to listen to IGMP version 3 or for IPv6 MLD version 2. Because he's going to give me a different source specific. So IGMP version 2 is just anyone bicycling. IGMP version 3 is 10.1.1.1 bicycling, or Paul bicycling. Okay, 10.1.1.1, 239.1.1.1. We need a new format for that. So I need to make sure that IGMP, you can do a show IP IGMP interface and see if IGMP version 3 is enabled in your box. So that's a big thing here. The next thing is that when I get that 10.1.1.1, and I see that you want to join 239.1.1.1, I go, okay, who's the root? Well, it's 10.1.1.1. Where's the root? Rib. What's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root? Got to have a PIM neighbor. So as soon as I do that, I now send you a PIM S, G join. And then you say, who's the root? 10.1.1.1. Because you already know that, because you don't have to have the rendezvous point. Where is it? Rib. What's the PIM RPF neighbor? PIM S, G join. The strangest thing for me about troubleshooting SSM is typically on the last hop router, if I see the star, G join, I know I'm good. And if I'm in the rendezvous point and I see the S, G, then I know, so if I go to the last hop router and I see an S, if I go to the first hop router and I see an S, G, I know in any source multicast, the multicast stream has started sending. With source-specific multicast, you can go all the way up, S, G, all the way up to the first hop router. Doesn't mean the source is sending. Okay, it just means that the S, G made it all the way up. So in any source multicast, if you see an S, G in the first hop router, the source is sending. Source-specific multicast just means that it made it all the way up, doesn't mean the source is sending. So what you're going to do also is SSM is it doesn't need a rendezvous point. We need to know that, right? Because if you send me 239.1.1.1, I need to know who is the source, who is the RP for that, unless it's source-specific multicast. So just like if 10.1.1.1 is the rendezvous point for 239.1.1.1, but 10.2.1 is the rendezvous point configured for 239.100.1.1, I would also need to know that 232.1.1.1 is source-specific multicast and doesn't need a rendezvous point. Because I need to know whether or not I send a star, G or an S, G. Okay, so what by default on some of our platforms, just to let you know, 232/8 is the default source-specific multicast group. So iOS XR and a couple of our other platforms, I think the Nexus 9K actually have 232/8 as the default. Not all of our platforms do. So you need to know at every hop, so every hop along the way here, they have to ask themselves not only who's the root, where's the root, what's the PIM RPF neighbor for the root, but they also have to ask themselves, is this SSM and I'm supposed to send an S, G join, or is this does this have a rendezvous point? So the biggest one here typically is some platform here didn't have 232 as the default, or you went through another router. So source-specific multicast troubleshooting, you get the IGMP, S, G, S, G, S, G all the way to the end. And this is where I was supposed to remind myself that the multicast doesn't necessarily make it there. Okay, you ready? No receivers are getting multicast traffic. No receivers are getting multicast traffic. Where would you start? No receivers, which is good. It's a lot better than just that's usually a lot easier when it's all or nothing. Where do you start? Receiver. That's an option. I start someplace else. Where might I start? Rendezvous point. I'm going to start at the rendezvous point. Why am I going to start at the rendezvous point? Because if boy didn't meet girl, I'm going to go to the dating service. right? I've actually never used this analogy on a recorded thing before. Anyway, so if boy doesn't meet girl, I'm going to go to the rendezvous point. I'm going to go to the dating service. So I'm going to start, it's most efficient for me, I'm going to start at the rendezvous point because it's going to tell me which way to go. Okay, so when I'm troubleshooting, I'm going to start at the rendezvous point, and I'm going to start at the RP. So I'm going to go to the RP. If there's a star comma G for the oil, okay, is there a star comma G for the oil, for the outgoing, is there a star comma G with an oil? What's an oil? Outgoing interface list. Somebody wants to be in on that multicast group. Some woman out there wants to hook up with someone who wants to bicycle. Okay, so somebody wants to listen to that. So if there is no star comma G at all on the rendezvous point, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to any last hop router. Doesn't matter. I'm going to go to any last hop router and start there. If there's a star comma G, but there's no S comma G, there's no source. This is any source multicast, right? So, because I have a rendezvous point there. So if there's no S comma G, so there's an oil, there's people wanting to, and if there's none of either, just to let you know, if there's none of either, I'm still going to start at the last hop router. Because again, multicast, when people are saying it doesn't work, it's typically because the receiver's not getting it. I don't usually get calls of like, the rendezvous point is not getting multicast. It's usually the receiver's not getting multicast. So I'm typically always going to start on that end anyway, just to let you know. If there's a star comma G with an oil, great. There's someone down there who wants to go bicycling or kayaking. Now I'm looking for an S comma G. If there's no S comma G, then the multicast may have started on the first hop router. The register join didn't quite make it, otherwise I would have made it S comma G. So maybe they don't know who the rendezvous point is. Something's broken between the rendezvous point and the first hop router. So this is where I go. Some receivers are getting multicast traffic. Some receivers are getting multicast traffic. Where do you go? Your answer before is right now. So where I go is a last hop router, right? I go closest to the problem. So if some receivers are not getting the multicast, I'm going to go to the last hop router. A last hop router, obviously, that is not getting it. Now, I actually love problems like this because one thing I do, multicast I know, but for technologies that I don't know, I actually love having a working device and a non-working device, right? So I'm going to go to the last hop router, and if I really can't figure out what's going on here, I'll go check, even if it's multicast, I'll go check to find out, okay? So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to see whether or not I'm getting a pull. Am I getting an IGMP membership report or an MLD for thing? I'm going to see, do I know who the RP is for that multicast group? Am I getting a pull? You can actually do a show IP IGMP groups, and it'll tell you who's interested. Do I know who the rendezvous point is? Do I know where it is? Do I have a PIM RPF neighbor for it? One of the things I do see in people's networks that have problems with PIM is I've got a PIM neighbor here, but I don't have a PIM neighbor over there, and then that router goes away. And now, while I know how to get there from a routing perspective, I don't have a PIM neighbor. So we don't speak the same language. I can't build a multicast distribution tree with you. So with this one, I'm going to look for the pull, and then I'm going to look for who and what. Source-specific multicast, what I'm going to do is I'm always going to start at the first hop router. And the reason why I'm going to start the first hop router is because that's kind of sort of the rendezvous point, right? So with any source multicast, that was in the middle. I told you with source-specific multicast, the S comma G goes all the way to the first hop router. So now I'm going to go to the router where boy meets girl, right? Which is now the last hop router. If there's an S comma G with an oil, so if there's an S comma G with an oil, then somebody down there said, I want to join 10.1.1.1, 239.1.1.1, and it went all the way up to me. So there's a receiver. If yes, make sure traffic's coming in from the source. Did somebody forget to put PIM here? Is there an access list? Whatever. And so the key takeaways, remember, multicast trees are built backwards towards the root. Multicast traffic and ASM and SSM are triggered with a pull. It's high on the food chain, so look for the usual suspects. These are your key questions. I swear 90%, no matter how complicated it is, 90% of the time, this is what gives me the answers. There is additional stuff if you want some stuff. I have a website, Networking with Fish. This is a 6-part series that talks about MVPN, but it also does talk a lot about the multicast between the PEs and the end devices. So the multicast on the edge. This is a ride-along. This is actually the dating service, which was originally posted on Packet Pushers. And also there is a YouTube that I forget how many minutes it is that goes through only multicast streams, so 232 and 239. So I chose one SSM group and then one ASM group, and they're not getting through. Spoiler alert, I think for this one is I was using an impairment tool that actually blocked something, just to let you know. But I think this is a pretty good one if you're trying to figure out how to troubleshoot. It has ASM and SSM in it. I think it's only 12 minutes long. And of course, the 2-hour session, BRK IPM 2264, which will actually, because it has more time, go into more details about the actual commands that you would do at each and every router. And that's it. There are surveys. Please do the surveys. Apparently they're socks with little Cisco. I usually don't like the presents, but now I'm like, I want socks that say Cisco Live on them. But I don't get them. Anyway, so that's about it. If you have any questions, I'll be here afterwards. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming for an 8 a.m. session. Have a wonderful day.